Okay, so we've already talked a little bit about the story elements, but today I want to talk just a little bit about how they fit into Rikki-Tikki Tavi, which we just finished reading, and I also want to kind of focus a little bit more on just plot and conflict. So plot is defined as the literary element that describes the structure of a story. It shows arrangement of events and actions within a story. So it's basically just the related sequence of events, and they're in short stories like Rikki-Tikki Tavi and other works of fiction. And we have this little diagram right here, which we're gonna have to really know, especially for the K-Prep. And it just breaks down the components of plot. So our first component is exposition, and it's the start of the story and the situation before the action starts. So in the exposition, you're going to be introduced to the setting, the time and the place, the characters, and the basic situation, like what's going on. And in the exposition of Rikki-Tikki Tavi, we have Rikki-Tikki, the mongoose, and he is swept from his burrow by a flood, but then he's rescued by Teddy. So Teddy's family decides to adopt Rikki-Tikki. And then we go to the rising action, and this is the series of conflicts and crises in the story that leads to the climax. And this is where you're introduced to the conflict and the struggle, and usually the tension in the plot is really being increased right now. So the rising action in Rikki-Tikki is when Nag falls asleep in the bathroom while he waits to attack the humans. Rikki-Tikki wins a terrible battle against the cobra. The man shoots Nag in half and throws the snake on the trash pile. So that's like one component of the rising action in Rikki-Tikki. And you're also introduced to the conflict, which I probably should have said before, but it's when the safety of the garden is threatened by the two cobras, Nag and Nagaina. Rikki-Tikki decides he will kill the cobras, but first, he kills another deadly snake. It is his first kill, and man and his wife hail him as a hero. So next we get into the climax, which is the high point of the story, which it is also the high point of the diagram too. And this is the turning point, and it's the most intense moment, either mentally or in action. And in Rikki-Tikki, it's definitely in action. And this is when Darzy's wife fakes a broken wing to distract the cobra. Nagaina leaves her nest of nearly hatched eggs and begins to chase the bird. Rikki-Tikki kills the unhatched cobras, and Darzy's wife calls out a warning. Thinking the man killed her husband, Nagaina corners the entire family on the veranda. And next we have the falling action. And this is where just all of the events that follow the climax. And in Rikki-Tikki, this is when he taunts Nagaina with one last egg. She is frantic and begs for her baby back. With the snake occupied, the family escapes. Rikki-Tikki knows that if he does not kill Nagaina, neither the family nor the garden animals will ever be safe. He attacks and chases her into her underground den. Rikki-Tikki emerges victorious, announcing that Nagaina will not return. And lastly, we have the resolution, which is the conclusion or the breakdown, and it usually just ties everything together, and the reader learns how the conflict is resolved. So, in Rikki-Tikki Tavi, this is when the family and the animals are rejoicing, and Rikki-Tikki eats a huge celebration meal with the family, and he settles down as the proud protector of his human family and garden animals. Okay, so within plot, we did talk a little bit about the conflict of Rikki-Tikki, and we're going to focus a little bit on conflict as well. So, conflict is the dramatic struggle between two forces in a story. Without conflict, there is no plot. So, essentially, if there's no plot to a story, who wants to read that? I mean, there's no conflict, there's no plot, no one wants to read that. So all these images are probably just a little bit funny, but I mean, there's obviously some kind of conflict going on. And there's a few types of conflicts. They are character versus character, character versus nature, character versus society, and character versus self. So, character versus character is when there are two main characters, when the main character is in conflict with another character, and it could be human or not human. So, in Riki Tikki Tavi, Riki Tikki is experiencing a character versus character conflict with Naga Nagaina. Next, we have character versus nature, and this is when the main character is in conflict with the forces of nature, which serve as the antagonist. So you think of some stories about someone being lost at sea because of a storm. So in that case, the storm is the antagonist, and there is a character versus nature conflict. Then you have character versus society conflict, and it's when the main character is in conflict with the larger group, a community, society, culture, etc. So really it's just people like not fitting into the society, and they're just really against it. So you can think back to like the wartime and the hippies and there were the hippies, and they were really against war. I mean, that's a huge part of the society at the time. So both aspects of that society are just butting heads with each other. And lastly, you have character versus self conflict. And in this type of conflict, the main character experiences some kind of inner conflict. So usually you can tell the character's having a conflict if they're like sad or restless or down. Just something like that shows there's something going on inside of them, and their conflict is within themselves. They have to handle something themselves. But that is all that we have for plot and conflict, and a little bit more about story elements. We can talk about the rest of those at another time.